I'd like to welcome everybody to the July 24th City Council meeting for the City of Dexter. And ask you all to rise and pledge allegiance. Julian, Bonnie, if you would read us, please.
Oh, for sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll. Dan Schlaff, having excused absence.
Aldag? Yes. Griffin? Here. Hubbard? Here. Michelle?
Present.
Sunny Pharaoh?
Here.
Leo?
Here.
Ruby?
Present.
Keating? Here. Mallon?
Here.
We have a forum. Item C is approval of the meeting minutes from our city council meeting on July 10th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move we approve the minutes from the council meeting on July 10th.
Thank you. Motion by Sarah. Second.
A second.
Second by Aldag. Thank you. Bill, any comments on the minutes?
No.
Sam? Other members of council? Zach?
I would ask on page 6 of 8 that my requested comment be stricken. That was meant to be a lighthearted joke to light intentions, not to be an unofficial record. My apologies for not making it clear. Zach is correct. We don't need to see that anymore.
Fair enough. Good catch. Okay, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes with the one change, please signify by saying aye. You guys know what to do that?
I didn't say anything.
No, sorry, please call the vote to approve the minutes.
Griffin? Yeah. Hubbard? Yes. Aldag? Yeah. Sunny Pharaoh?
Aye.
Michelle?
Yes.
Here.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. We have no prearranged participation this evening. So down to item E, which is not arranged. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak under not arranged this evening? Yep.
Wow, just a minute, see if anybody else want to go first.
All right, fair enough.
It's a long walk out there.
No, I'll make the next one.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Please state your name and address for the record, please, huh?
I'll just go close. My name is Todd Austin. I live at 3594 Lane Drive. That's it for my notes. I'm standing here because I'm concerned about how decision making has been going in this council in the last couple of months. There have been repeated instances of decisions that I thought were unusually poor for this group. We bought our house in 2008. And in that 15 years, I've always felt that council made decent decisions. Maybe I didn't agree with the leadership, but overall, the decent choices were made. Reasonable choices. And I've lost that sense. And I don't like that. I think it started with the disastrous choice to name Forestry Park after Paul Hawkins. When my wife and I first heard that, our first thought was, well, this is a real insult. Why are they insulting Paul? And then on to the choice about where to put the fire station, which seemed utterly counter to every piece of professional advice this body had received for multiple years. And I just found it jaw-dropping. I mean, you had said yourself to me in private conversation that you thought that the city council would choose the Benedict site, which is why I voted for it against my personal reservations. Having no location in the bond measure, which I thought was a really poor choice. And moving on now to the excuse me, the childish games that are going on around this question right now. Back and forth, hit for tat, game after game. Just real disappointed about the operation of this council. And I don't like to feel that. I don't personally know several of you, have respect for all of those that I know personally. And I don't know what's going on in this place, but I'm not happy with it. It's just not going well. You know, I feel really stuck by the choice about the fire station. It seems a patently bad choice. It is counter to the long-term interests of this community. And I find it inexplicable. And all of the nonsense that's going on since is really troublesome. Really troublesome. I think we can do better. I think we need to do better. You know, as a citizen, a voter in this community, property owner, all those different categories that fall. I'm just not happy with the way things are going. And I don't know how to change that. You know, it occurred to me that maybe it would serve us well if you all resigned and we just hired a new bunch. No, just start fresh. Maybe that's what we need. I don't know. But I'm just really disappointed at how things are going. And that's all I have to say. That's what I came to say this evening. I've been thinking about it in different bits here and there. About doing this for quite a while since the nonsense was called. And this is the latest hit for the tap that came up. This kind of became the last drop. I mean, I thought I really had to show up that state time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming this evening. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? Please. Good evening.
By the way, hello, my name is Taryn Scheer, and I moved to Dexter in 2019. It's on Dan Holy Road.
What's your address, please?
7231 York Street,
Thank you.
Dexter. And as far as the fire station, ever since I've lived here, I walk by there, that big sign was there. I did vote for a new fire station. I see where the building is and we're growing. I mean, now they've got these big buildings over there. You've got $500,000 condominiums, and now you can have another project that you want to put more housing in, which is fine. I understand building and improving. And then when I saw that council did not want to, we're just going to go ahead and use the old building, I had to take her across. I thought it was going to be in the corner. And I actually called someone on the council and they said, well, they changed their mind. My background is my husband, and late husband, and I renovated condemned properties that were not habitable, and we had 7 buildings over by campus. And I understand about old buildings and any problems. And I look at the building that we have at the fire station and I'm thinking, it's not the right location. It's not going to serve the community the best. And I agree with what this gentleman said, and I'm not going to repeat what he did that. I just went through, like the different comments people made, because our only communication seems to be sometimes and stuff like that. And I don't like it either. Where's the professionalism? Apparently, many years ago, yourself included, Mayor, everyone said, hey, we need something new, we want to grow. Well, now you're going back. And one of the things that really stood out to me was the grant money. The fact that grant money would be given for the new area, not for the older area, and that there's even more problems that can come up. Why can't we put this to donors? Let us decide where our money should go. Why don't we see what is presented along with council? Because it seems like we have more adults. You know, an adult that came up here and said, this is ridiculous. I agree. I think this needs to be more well thought out, and I kind of feel that we're not a part of this community. They're making all the decisions. And I think it can be a lot better for everything. Because, I mean, the little bit of Dexter we have, the city, it's growing. And I just don't feel that well, those monies are allocated down there for the best interest as we go forward in the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. I'd like to reach out to you afterwards and understand better the grant money comment that you made. I don't want to address it right now, but I'm not sure what I understand that part of it, so I may contact you after the meeting.
That's fine.
Jim? Jim is not going to go on stand for the 5 minutes, so we're going to put a chair down.
You know what?
Student. I made it work. Me and my sock, that's what I fall. My apologies.
Your choice.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hi, folks. Hi, Zach. Jamie. Oh, what are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm pleased to meet you. Dan, I'm sorry to see you, that you've shrunk a little bit since the last time we talked. Alan, Sean, down the road, Justin, yeah. I'll just, welcome students, used to be a teacher, 6th grade, 2nd grade.
Don't forget your name and address, please.
Oh, sorry, Jim McCarter, 3580 Hudson Street, Dexter, Met 48130. I'm a 30-year resident. With my wife, 2 kids, went through the school system, both. I was a school system first responder and a teacher. I've often said after I moved to this community, I intend to die in this community when that time comes. I hope it's a long way off. This afternoon, just 3 short hours ago, I was coming from my neurologist's office. Some of you know that I've come here before in a wheelchair. I'm not in a wheelchair tonight. And 25% of the time these days, thank goodness. And he said to me as I left, he said, Jim, remember, live a full life, not just a full calendar. That's why I'm a little puzzled as to why I'm here tonight, because living a full life doesn't really mesh very well with what's on the agenda for me tonight. I became aware of a letter to the editor to the Dexter Sun-Times just last night, which I've read through, and frankly, I think we've been here before. I've been here before. October 2020 was making some similar comments along the lines of when you're in the public sphere in government, what your responsibility is in a democracy. And I listened to both of the comments that were just made. I respect those comments. Thank you very much for making them. I happen to disagree with it personally. Sean, I think when you last ran, I think won with 64% of the vote. I think something like that. And you outpolled the millage by about 3%. My memory, okay? And I believe that at the time it was very clear, Zach, what your primary position was on the fire station, and Sean, I think it came into it as an obvious campaign issue. We all have been dealing with this for a long time. And we had an election, and you won, and you lost, and the bond won. There was a lot of information available. I was in on public meetings on that. I researched it. I paid attention, even long before the bond proposal. I attended meetings, listened to the comments. So I think I'm a reasonably informed citizen. This is not some sway back and forth. What was the word in the letter? I gotta find this because it's pretty remarkable to me. It had something to do with long manipulated decision, I think it was, long manipulated. And then now you've got a charter amendment that's been raised for you folks that conveniently enough defines a quadrilateral of land that omits the current fire station location from where we might put the new fire station.
when the bond proposal was passed, when you folks voted, I know that was not some quick flip-flop decision. I thought it was decided. And I could go back to living other parts of my full life. Now here we are again. And this isn't new territory. This is old territory, revisited over and over and over again. Last time around, Zach, I think you were the one who was trumpeting, act now. Need to act, time is money. We're wasting time, we wasted too much time. Let's get on with it. Okay, let's get on with it. Let's get on with it. You guys voted. And you got a charter amendment that's coming up that is going to conveniently exclude the place that you voted for? And that is manipulative? Come on, really? Now, this is an old playbook. I went and I looked up the Friends of Mill Creek Park website. Not to be confused with the Friends of Mill Creek.org, because I remember them. They were an environmental group. Just because you add park at the end of it does not make it an environmental group. I have walked the B2B trail. I've played with my kids in Mill Creek Park. I've driven my wheelchair up and down that hill in and out of Mill Creek Park. I am not an enemy of Mill Creek Park, but I am not a friend of this charter amendment. Not by any stretch. Let's get on with it. And stop, you're talking about nitpicking back and forth.
Jim, address up.
I'm sorry. Childish back and forth stuff. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I look at that letter, Jamie. I'm astonished. I'm really astonished. I can't understand how you would go from the committee, the Dexter Citizens for Responsible Government, with its claims for democracy and transparency, et cetera, with a lot of the critiques that I made 3 years ago, to this one, with no names, no responsible people, just a website with biased information that precludes the stuff that was behind the vote that went before this commission before. Really? Let's get on with it. I hope you'll vote this thing down if it comes up for a vote to have the council push this onto the agenda in November. I were a lot further along with the fire station in November than that. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak to? Good evening. How are you, JD?
Fine, how are you?
Good.
Jamie?
Let's take a name and address. Good.
JD Boyston, 6951 Wellington Drive.
Thank you.
I, speaking along the same lines, similar topic as all the other speakers here tonight. And I can echo the comments of the first two, actually. Because I was part of a group of citizens that put a petition together that is active and collected over 5% of the required 5% signatures. That has the same language that's actually in the petition, that's where it actually comes from, to put the fire department location to a vote of the citizens. And I know personally from talking to residents, many of them, when I asked them, did you vote for this? And they said yes. And if they said yes, and I asked, where did you think the fire department was going to be? And a majority of the people I spoke to said at the new location, which I across from the middle school, because they'd seen the sign that said proposed future home of the Dexter area fire station. So I know, and that's just a small sample. I was just one of the people collecting signatures, and I heard from many others the same thing. The residents that they spoke to expected when they voted for that's what it was going to be. So you can say yeah, there's information out there, but when you have that sign, that's a very visible information that says, if you take out the word, yeah, it said proposed, so it's not guaranteed, but it's advertising that says this is likely where we plan to put the fire department. And so I urge you to approve the resolution tonight and to put it to a vote of the citizens. And actually hear what they have to say, let them choose. The petition that we put together, we thought it would be on the November ballot this year, but learned that it won't be on the ballot until November of next year. So from a timing standpoint, it would be better if it was put to a vote sooner rather than later. And to echo what some of the others said, the information that, and one of the couple of big questions I have, because we can go back and forth. People have talked about all the discussions that have happened, but we've had this property downtown, that location for the whole time. So why did we go through the exercise of buying land, having the public discussions, having the plans drawn out for the both locations, going through all this? If all we were gonna do was land back at the same property, then we have the whole time, and we didn't need to spend the time and money and effort to go through that exercise. It seems like exercise of futility. But what was the point? And you have many experts, all the experts seem to say, in your own city council, your council appointed committee for the recommended the new location across the middle school. So again, we're ignoring all of that, ignoring what it seems like a lot of the voters expected and wanted. And I don't understand that, why we're just ignoring all that. So I would encourage you to reconsider and put this to a vote of the citizens and get their voice in the location. Because I originally thought it was going to be on the location. I expected that the location was going to be also on the millage, on the ballot mill proposal. And for that reason, I did not vote for it because it didn't specifically have a location. Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight and for your comments. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak this evening? Is there anyone online that has comments they'd like to make? Josh, let me know if you see a hand raised. I know. Okay, thank you for the public comment this evening. We're down to item F, declaration of conflict of interest. Bill?
The item that we have on the agenda tonight for the submitted by Councilman Griffin. Both Mr. Michelle and Ms. Griffin were on the petition committee, and based on the conflict of ordinance and conflict of interest ordinance, section 17-6, paragraph 5, public servant shall not participate, approving, disapproving, voting, discussing, recommending, on any matter in which the public servant or an entity or organization with the public servant is directly involved.
So I did have a conversation with City Attorney Scott Mendel earlier today. He based on his read of the conflict of interest, there's a match in time.
So what was the rationale? Just
Got it online. But basically the participation in a political campaign is specifically exempted from the conflict of interest.
The ordinance does say that contributions to the campaign are exempt. But this is a group. They clearly were the lead as the address for the committee, the treasurer for the original. They clearly are involved. All the discussions that were had by the council at the time on conflict of interest said, we don't want to have any appearance of any impropriety or any reason that there would be a conflict that would be perceived by the public. This definitely falls into that category. And with all due respect to Mr. Manzel, the ordinance says that if there's a dispute about whether or not there's a conflict, then everyone thinks there is.
On,
I would also like to point out that while Councilmember Griffin is not here for the last meeting, Michelle did voluntarily recuse himself under the conflict of interest ordinance last time under this discussion item, so I don't really see what has changed since then.
Tim,
I appreciate that you reached out to legal counsel. I am inclined to agree with their reading of the conflict of interest ordinance. Additionally, the item on the agenda is not about the Friends of Mill Creek Park initiative. That is a citizen initiated charter amendment. This is a council initiated charter amendment.
I guess I'll answer the question. So this time, staff has had time to ask counsel who went to law school to interpret law. I didn't want to make it an issue last time because staff did not have the time to consult with counsel.
okay, so that no one declare. That is that correct? Was declared thereon. Okay. Item G is approval of the agenda.
I'm looking for the agenda.
Motion by Griffin. Is there a second to approve the agenda? Okay, I will declare the meeting adjourned. You don't have an agenda, folks, I'm sorry.
We'll make a motion to approve the agenda without the item included from.
We need one more to build, second, do you make a motion to do what?
We move the agenda without the item in a two.
Okay. Is there a second? So you have a motion, no one can discuss it. Then you want to second the motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the table to approve the agenda without an item? Now you want that comments, so I'll do these numbers.
If, there's a part of me that wants to have the agenda without this item and move forward. There's a part of me that wants to discuss it because without the discussion of this agenda item, the true intentions of this amendment will not be at the table. And all we have is an editorial or a letter to the editor at the table for conversation and for all the town to see. There was a lot that has gone into the conversation of the fire station. And we can't ignore this and move forward, but we just allow for more misinformation and more misrepresentation of many of the council members who have sit at the table, come to the table with good intentions to move things forward. So as much as I would love this to not be there, there is a part of me that I also don't want to ignore it. So my comment was that if Mr. Samifaro is, okay, we change this from a consideration to a discussion item.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so motion to approve the agenda then is with M2 as a discussion, not consideration. So I'm hearing Joe and Son.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any other comments this time? Anyone? Okay, please call Zach.
I do have a question on K three and K five on the consent agenda.
Okay, so K3 and K5, we move to M3 and M4. So you've asked those questions to the city manager ahead of time or no?
No, I was in New York City when the packet was promulgated. I didn't have time to review it till I returned home last night at 11.
Okay, so we pull those two off,
It should be fairly simple.
no problem. Director, please call the vote to approve the amended agenda.
Hubbard,
No.
Michelle's,
No,
Alday,
Yes.
Griffin,
No.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we're 3-3 back to no agenda. And we want to try again?
I will move the agenda in the packet as in the supplement.
Motion by Senator Farrell. Any second? Approve the agenda as
I second.
second by Griffin. Thank you, Jamie. Hey, Georgia, please call the vote.
Alday,
Yes.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Hubbard, yes, Michelle's,
yeah,
Griffin,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So motion carries, thank you. That was a lot harder than I thought it would be. We have no public hearings this evening, the two communications in the packet. The upcoming meeting list, and a thank you letter to city council from Ruth, who lives over in Patton County. Does anybody have any comments on the communications this evening? Okay, our first report tonight is from our finance director. Oh, I'm sorry,
I
I'm
just
sorry.
have one. I'm just curious when something goes in the packet and when something doesn't. Is that when the office receives a letter addressed to all of council? Or-
Yeah, so
It got put in my mailbox, and since it said city council, I asked them to put the copies. Instead of me just. I could have recorded it either way, but I.
Right, oh, I'm just curious when.
That was in my mailbox at the last meeting, Jenny.
Just making comment on that, the reason why my name is on there is that was one of my teachers in elementary school. So we know each other personally.
That's great.
It's not, not, she didn't want to thank everyone who offered.
It's all good. No, it's good. Good to know. Any other comments on the communications? Okay. Marie, thanks for waiting. Finance Director, Treasurer Anderson.
Yes, gotta have the end. We are, in the middle of a lot of assessing work. So council has my quarterly report in front of you. We have finished the last fiscal year. With a healthy addition to the fund balance. Majority of that came from one-time revenue from the state. Most of which are everywhere, and also increased inputs. I did want to mention in my report just briefly the mistake. I guess I'm doing pretty good in 21 years. I've only done 2 on a tax bill. And that was that the return address on the back of the bill that was sent to people who don't have a mortgage was our old address. So what I'm planning to do, different things, in the end of August, I'm going to send a postcard out to those individuals that have not yet paid. To let them know that the address is 3515 Broad, not 81 Main. And then this tax bill only to allow for time before we will accept homeowners. So that's a way to mitigate that error. That's all I have for you.
Councilman Marie? Zach?
Do you require any action from council to accept late payments? Was that within your authority?
It's within my,
Okay. I did have a question on page 20.
well, not late payment, but postmarks.
Postmark. Late receipt.
Page
On
20, you said?
page 20, it says restricted for 3515 Broad, $8.4 million. We're not gonna need another $8.4 million for this building, I hope, right?
No, that's the fire department.
Okay.
Yeah, it also says it on page 22. Under the cash available for specific use.
Yeah, no, that was supposed to be,
I wanted to add that I think, staff deserves a lot of credit for the surplus. The surplus is not just in the general fund. And yes, we benefited from some state aid there, but you managed the sewer and the water funds, both so that they had small surpluses that, and I know that the reserves in those two funds are lower than others, so good job in helping us build our reserves there. That's appreciated.
oh, speaking of reserves, I'm sorry, there was one more thing I wanted to report.
Forest billiards.
One of the reserves, and it's nothing because lack of tax tribunals. We do have two now in front of the Michigan Tax Tribunal, two commercials. The one, we are now in the stage of, doing appraisals and that sort of thing and possibly talking some kind of pre-settlement. So, Mr. Manzel and I will probably be in front of you at your next meeting to talk about that.
Okay. That's the first one on the list?
Yeah.
On the full session? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Jamie?
Yep, on page 22, upper fund balance, it says assigned for La Fontaine Art, $5,000. I think this maybe came up on Parks and Rec Commission, where maybe as part of their approval, maybe Michelle will remember, I think they had to put some money in a fund for potentially purchasing art at that location. But then I think the conversation on Parks has been, that's a highly visible location and good for rotating art as opposed to permanent art. I just didn't know if at any time, if that money's just gonna sit in there forever because we don't actually want permanent art there, or we want to do something else with that and what that process would look like.
Isn't my understanding is that that was part of their site plan, right?
In the.
Right, in the PUD, so that has to sit there. It was set aside for permanent art, therefore it has to be permanent art. So it will remain rotating until the ACH makes a recommendation to this body to purchase something that worked well there. And then ultimately, it's not just that it's worked well, but that it's in the budget of that $5,000 and whatever we want to match or add to that. And we've had a couple that we've looked at in the past, but they were just too expensive.
Anything more to add?
That was,
So you're gonna go through this. Okay. Good questions. Any other questions on the fourth quarter report? It's a good one. Okay,
Thank you, council.
appreciate it, Ray. Next up is our public services superintendent. Good evening, Tim.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. First, want to say, all got one here last meeting. Yeah, I decided to move back up and I had some issues. So I take care of those, but to report some from you guys, if there's any questions, I'll take them.
What is the completion date for Danway?
I knew you were gonna ask that, and I was trying to look it up. I want to say
so I think that's actually in my report.
the 11th. It was weekend, I think Thursday before
So Dexter Day.
Dexter Days, and then
Yeah.
after Dexter Days, they will finish Dexter and Arbor, the crosswalk going across there.
Yeah, so they should be milling, the end of this week and then to be done with all the application material on the Illinois, on August 8th.
Great.
According to their current timeline, as far as, weather and any other issues that are running into.
So they did get them inside. So, I'm on vacation, so I wasn't here today, so I don't know how far they got since I left on Fridays. They were taking, put the black dirt down with this Stevens Trail, so.
James?
Regarding the speed detection device, I mentioned a couple meetings back that there were some residents interested in having that on Ann Arbor Street as you're kind of approaching Dover, I think. I don't know if there's a queue of where that's going next. if we still only have one, or if we do have two again.
I think we're back to 2 again, and I can talk to Kurt about getting them over there, so.
Any other question for Tim? Zach?
An update on the barriers. Three weeks ago, they were up until 11 PM on Friday night. The question was, what happened, when did they get down, and how we're gonna make sure they get down in a timely manner?
What I talked to Kurt about, the first thing is, I know they've gone a couple of times in the concerts and the bar seem to go a little later. So the guys are coming in, they're trying to manage their time, and as far as getting there when it's done. But they, you know, a couple of times they come in where they're heavily on the, you know, concert done. So they've been pushing it off a little bit later just to make sure everybody's gone, everybody's around it. There is access where people can go around if they needed to. If they were out when the concert was, so, but I had talked to her about.
Pretty good, all the work you're doing,
Thank you.
all the guys, they're short staffed, so.
Yeah, and they're doing a good job. So,
Appreciate that, they're two open, right?
yes, we got 2 openings. We had 2 interviews,
How did those go?
really well. Really well. Really good candidates. So, and we got a couple of their applications. We'll take a look at those when we get back. We're also gonna have second interviews. Take a look and see where moving forward with it. So hopefully everything goes well and get some more people on board and get this thing going.
Yeah, anything to do with overseeing the ceiling and striping, it looks great out there, so.
I didn't, that's Josh and,
All right, I'll give it. Thanks
so,
for that.
so. Good.
Yep, I think we're good, thanks, Tim.
Justin, I good. Perfect.
Next up is our community development manager, hi Michelle.
Hello, council, how are you this evening?
Good, you?
I'm fine, thank you. You have my report in front of you, it's rather short, it's unusual, but if you've got any questions, please let me know.
David?
Yep, I was kind of expecting to see the champion gymnastics, what they do on this agenda. Was it just recommended for approval at the last time commission?
It was recommended for approval, but it had a number of conditions. So we sat down and met with the applicant. I sat down and met with her last week. We went over all of the different conditions, and the point, because there were so many conditions, and because there was the word confusion wouldn't be the right word. There was much discussion at planning commission on the particular use. I felt that a clean application and plan coming to council would be a better thing than a plan as planning commission saw. So.
And then it seems like there are a lot of things coming up for planning, public hearing wise and otherwise in August. I don't know if you're able to give just a general overview of those things. It's probably in here, but just as a verbal reminder.
Yeah, there are two site plans that are going to be considered by the planning commission. The PUD preliminary site plan application for 8180 Main. That's the Pelham project. It's being proposed as a 2-building, excuse me, 28-unit residential condominium project. And the initial proposal for conceptual was 3 buildings, 33 units. There was much discussion, both at the planning commission, at council, and in the public, and they have heard the comments, and they have revised their plan in their opinion to address those concerns. The consultants are still reviewing, and so is staff. Excuse me, but it is, there will be 2 4.5-story buildings, garage, underground portion of it, for parking, and then the first floors 1 through 4 will be for the units, as opposed to the conceptual, which was first floor, ground floor parking, and floors 2 through 5 being residential units. The other residential project is the one on Grand Street. That's 7997, 7965, Grand Street, right next to Grandview Commons, between Grandview Commons and the cemetery. That's a 76 unit apartment proposed development, 2 buildings. It is an attainable housing project. So it's going to be on the opposite end of the column. Is market rate. Mill Creek Flats is attainable. Again, the issue for that one was the treatment along the property line with the cemetery, and they heard what Planning Commission Council and the public has said, and they're very sensitive to that. And I think that the development will address it appropriately. There are 2 text amendments that will come in front of the Planning Commission as well. One is for fences, and the other one is escaping me, but they are on the website and public notices have come out for them. Recreation equipment. Oh, no, thank you. It's the recreational equipment. It's again, clarifying and tweaking, some things that the new ordinance, look, Jackson. Thank you.
So Michelle, your report touched on the Mill Creek Trailhead, or potential for one at the confluence of the park and the trail, those grand cemetery there, right at the end of Grand Street.
Yep.
And Justin, your report had a mention of the county interaction that you had, where they asked us to budget approximately $200,000, I think it was, towards the Chelsea connector. That is an important project for, I think, us in the future here. I don't know if the Parks Commission has been talking about what they want in the trailhead, or even a kiosk or whatever, but I think it would be interesting, Jamie, to have some feedback from Parks. I think we could start planning what that trailhead, or defining what that trailhead means there. It's always been envisioned at the end of Grand, that you have the space of, I don't know the address, but opposite Iraq Gales is a heavy parking use now, so they can drive a lot that could be converted to public parking, which we need downtown anyway. Anyway, I think that whole area should be talked about, and maybe it's appropriate to have some ideas from the Parks Commission on what they're thinking. With the thought. I've got a couple things from your report, I got 1 2 years ago. Yeah, at some point we're gonna be talking about that. In your report, I think you typed the construction was supposed to start in 2024, but we might have not been in time.
No, they want to construct next year.
In our park?
The Dexter, Chelsea,
Okay.
the
Okay.
Parker.
What we should be talking about.
And I have one, I'm sorry, Sean.
No, that's all. No.
I have one verbal update. I will be participating in a meeting with DTE regarding some improvements to lines that they're doing, coming down Dexter Chelsea Road, crossing the creek and coming into the city. And one of the things that I mentioned to them is I'd like to discuss the potential relocation of the lines as they pertain to 3045 Broad Street in that project. It does not make any sense for DTE to, and we learned this from when the substation was taken down, to not incorporate any line movement or any pole movement or relocation when they do these upgrades, because it ends up creating double cost and double work for them. Even if a developer would pay for the relocation right there, it's still costing a time element for DTE. So that's something I will be talking with them about tomorrow.
Couple more things, just relative to your report. We didn't touch on this at the last meeting, but under number 3, the self-storage is proposed in the industrial park. I want the council to know that I did attend that pre-app meeting, and my comment was, I don't think the industrial park is a good spot for storage. I'd like to see jobs, projects, a great job there. So I wanted to know what feedback I gave on that particular plan.
And I can give an update on that. The applicant has been very responsive to the comments that you received from planning commission, consultants, staff, and the public. And he's looking at finding a way to do similar to the business condominiums that Vance and O'Brien did on across from Desktop. It's a linear, they take different units. You have a certain amount of office space and a certain amount of manufacturing, storage, et cetera, in the back. He's looking at doing something like that across the front, and then his storage units in the back. That way he's creating the job creation that the park requires, as well as providing a need within the community.
Have to go to that one, too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what.
So your lead item on your general updates was the meeting between Dexter and SILE. And I appreciate that you provided a summary. I'm interested to hear from our team, was there, Sam, Joe? Thoughts on the discussion or comments? Please. There we go.
A lot of discussion, SIO was interested, I mean, basically said, is this something that the city wants to do? Is that something that, you know, is something that we want to pursue? So they're asking about that, and also, they were wondering, they were asking about whether or not that we had the water or wastewater treatment capacity for that as well, and that's the item that at the end of Michelle's report, where it said the city work on capacity study. That was something we didn't tell them that we were working on, and it was going to be on the agenda tonight. The other sort of overarching question I thought was just a discussion overall of that area and how it's used, how it might be used. You know, we talked a little bit about their master plan, the wording that was in the master plan, and how it referred to that area. Just a lot of really in general discussion topics about the property in the area. And that's really, as a first meeting, that's really kind of where the discussion was. You know, we were talking about how many houses are gonna be there, this versus that, or how much open space this versus that, or features like trails or many hands development. It was very generic. In fact, a lot of the discussion was trying to pull it back to being more generic by saying, here's the land, you know, if you take away the colors, what would that potentially look like? So, not. I'm sorry.
In terms of their priorities.
Yes, exactly. In terms of the priorities of SIO and if we had, I mean, they literally said, are you guys planning for this area? And aside from a little bit that we might do in a master plan, you know, we don't have plans for that area, so. But that was discussion.
And a little bit of everything, Joe said, it was a really nice meeting. I think we really came together first and foremost under working together towards the common understanding and common goal. And I thought that was a really nice sort of spirit to the meeting, that it was a good discussion regarding both of our communities, the fact that we are so adjacent and anything of the communities impact each other. So it was really nice to come to the table with that understanding and looking towards this based on our common goals.
Thank you. Zach?
Just a quick question. Scioto Township, I know, wants to preserve that in like semi-rural, or whatever they're calling it. And one of the mechanisms they've been discussing to do that is purchase of development rights. Are they aware or recognize that the purchase of development rights program only protects land for 50 years? Is that too much of a detail?
We did not get into that
Okay.
particular type of detail, but is that something that could be discussed as part of the conversation, potentially at a future meeting.
I think that, sorry, I think that. Memo here. Our homework was the capacity study and theirs was to look at goals for land preservation, and I would imagine that would be part of it.
Right.
Because they have a whole committee for that, so they're definitely looking at detail.
They're very good at. Reacting if somebody requests, to have a particular portion of, property preserved. What they haven't, accomplished is to take the goal of preservation and figure out before something comes in, what lands are worth preserving in order to achieve the goals that they have for that rural character, for the natural features preservation, but also as it relates to any passive park and recreational element. And so in playing off what Ms. Hubbard said, that's what they're going to be looking at, is how we can figure out what areas within this property are the ones that, not only that we just want to save property, but are saving, how do they align with other township goals? And then, of course, how do they or will they align with any city goals? And city goals mean connectivity. Right.
You got your next meeting set up on the 11th?
Yes.
Yeah.
With respect to the consent agenda, 5, which is the update to the wastewater capacity study for an amount not to exceed $22,800. That was referred to as our homework as part of this project, but also in the memo in the packet, staff has indicated that it's been since 2017 since we have had such a study done. So I'm just curious to know, were we not in conversation with SIO about the possible annexation of this property? Would staff still be recommending an update to our wastewater capacity study?
Yeah. Mostly because we have had other properties that have approached us with interest. I think most notably, Plainman Farms, they expressed interest in annexation, and we weren't able to tell them with any level of specificity, yes, we could or could not handle your wastewater stream, without doing additional study. But, you know, as we work through other redevelopments, even within our own boundaries, existing, that's important information to have. And I think keeping that updated and keeping that relevant, so that way we can pull it out whenever somebody approaches it, either annexation or redevelopment. We have that information and use it.
And then I just have one piece of feedback, I guess, for the subcommittee who is having these conversations, is that, I guess, the first question that it sounds like SIO, or a big question they asked was, is this meeting Dexter's goals or something to that effect? That I would just appreciate if and when this comes back to us, that we have some quantifiable measure of benefit to the city of Dexter, that we're able to consider by this possible annexation. So whether it's, there have been talks about additional water, possible wells over there, something like that, or if somebody wants to make the claim that there are additional property tax dollars to be gleaned from that, I would like that to be in numbers as much as possible. Thank you.
I think that was also part of the discussion. It wasn't just what are them coming and saying, what are our goals, and us talking about, that in terms of the bigger picture of the master plan. Also, they wanted to know, that if we would move forward, if this benefited us, and there was sort of a discussion of how it would benefit us, and I don't think we can make that determination without what you're talking about. Or without the capacity study.
All right, well, I appreciate the additional feedback and all the questions. Any further questions for Michelle? No. Okay, we'll move down. There's a written sheriff report in the packet. Any comments or questions? We're done. Is there? Move down to city manager report. And that, I asked you questions about 3 and 5 under his report, because we didn't move those further than.
Oh, sure. So, so I have a fairly substantial city manager report. One of the items of note that I wanted to call out is the implementation of early voting. I did have a conversation with the deputy county clerk and elections director, and their concept for the implementation of early voting is basically to not regionalize it in the sense of like Washington County area, but more, city of Dexter, Dexter Township, Webster Township would be like a region to try and set up polling locations within different subregions of Washington County. And the county clerk's office is expecting to enter into agreement with either 22 or 23, depending on kind of where we want to go with it. Where it'd be a collaborative effort to implement early voting for the 9 days prior to each election. We'd be required to if we were to take it on ourselves, we'd be required to operate a polling location for 9 days, 8 hours a day. It'd be here, and we've hired a few election inspectors to help manage it. If we go in with the county, we could potentially be a host, but they're not making that guarantee. But essentially the county would hire election inspectors and manage the different polling locations and do all the advertising and notices out to residents. And then essentially we would buy into that program just based on the number of registered voters along with all the other municipalities. So I'll probably bring this back as a discussion item to get couples take on what your thoughts are, whether we should go alone or work with the county. But the county is asking for commitments sooner rather than later. So it'll be a quick turn.
So what would be, I mean, if you in a room, then we just staff it, run it, and pay for it, everything, and with the county, then how's it different?
So the biggest issue the biggest hurdle that we would have to overcome is you have to have a separate tabulator that you're not using on election day. And so we would have to buy a new tabulator because we only have as many as we need on election day currently. And so those are not cheap, but the county does have spares that they're able to that they've either purchased or just have that they're able to put into service for us. So we wouldn't have to buy our own.
Wait, from the standpoint of staff. Something the county would staff, or we staff it, would it be?
So if we were to do it alone, we would staff it. If we go in with the county, then the county hires and manages the election inspectors to work the 9 days. That they're asking that each of the boards that participate volunteer to basically manage one of the precincts for a day. But other than that, they would do all the coordination, they would do all the hiring.
And then what's the hours that they would have for the early voting?
So it would be a minimum of 8 hours. I don't know the details of is it 9 to 5 or whatever.
So potentially you could do it during office hours.
Oh,
or something.
Yeah.
But
Just on the voting tablet. Zach?
No,
Okay. Other questions are also, I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure if he's done. to speak.
What is there?
Go ahead, Zach.
So I guess I'll jump into K3. My question is whether or not that invoice qualifies as an agreement under MCL.
It does.
It does, and
Yeah. And
council's good with it.
we,
Mr.
we,
Manziel?
we've used the exact same format in previous years.
Okay. My question for K5 is if the applicants for the annexation have offered to pay any of the $22,800 towards the study.
Not that I'm aware of, but my thought on that is that it's a study that is greater than one development. It's looking more holistically at the city, all of the redevelopments that are, on the table currently, potential redevelopments that may be coming, in the future at some point, and other properties outside of the city, including but not limited to the Baker Road property.
So, Justin, maybe you could help me, I don't want to gloss over the public safety facilities update that's here. Over the last month and a half, we've hired a construction manager. The lead for that company is sitting in the audience today. Justin, maybe you want to introduce him?
Sure.
If you wouldn't mind, I put down, I'd like to introduce your council, you're going to be working with us. Sure. And we've got an important month coming up because they're putting together cost estimates for the various renovations / new builds, I call it that, options at the fire station site, and that's exciting. I mean, that's much further along than we've ever been in a conceptual state than any other place. And this council's gonna need to work together when those come before us, because we're gonna have a choice to make. That's gonna ultimately shape the design and lead us in a direction. So.
Yeah, so same answers with Cunningham Lynn. He's their president, and city council selected Cunningham Lynn for phase 1 of the global safety facilities project with the global design and study of redevelopment versus new build.
He's also here to help on the old business item.
For the split.
Well, so, I thought it was appropriate to introduce him under the contract.
Just another quick note, so I'm gonna be taking another 2 weeks of maternity leave, this week, not the following week, but week after that, for 2 weeks. And then that'll be it. She's off daycare and does anybody have any questions on any other items?
I have a question on that item specifically, and I'm not trying to like guilt you into this sort of thing.
I plan to continue to help out with whole planning.
Okay, because I just wanted to know, like, maybe we needed somebody else there who's been, okay, all right, if you're gonna be there, great.
Okay, any other questions for Justin? Okay, I don't have a lot of updates in my report. Yeah, on the written, I do want to ask the question, do we want to walk together next today's grade like we did last year? Meeting will be after that August 12th date, so I thought I'd bring it up here today. If you do, we'll definitely meet on Inverness there in front of where Don Fisher usually live, still is. And hope everyone wants to do that again.
You know, I can go on.
I don't, all right, well,
You know, I love
if you're up
parades.
if you're up to it, bring your dog, bring your kids, it's all good. Student reps are welcome to join us once a year, so maybe you're in the parade otherwise, but
Did you say?
what that?
August,
August 12th, yeah. Saturday morning, at 10 o'clock. One meeting that I didn't get on here because it was scheduled today, I will be meeting with Jerry Spencer, who spoke to us a couple of meetings ago. regarding the 3045 project, and we'll meet with him next Wednesday. To get his thoughts on that. Give me my written note, but you know what I'm doing. Do we have any questions for me? Okay, I'm hoping that we can, work together here as we go forward. One topic has become way too divisive. And it's not helpful. Not helpful. None of us can predict the future. As I've sat in this chair for a while, I've talked to residents, I've always tried to share what I thought, even my opinion. Todd, I shared my opinion with you over whether I thought that would be on one side or the other. It didn't work out that way. And it doesn't make it wrong, doesn't make it right. It's the way discussion happens. It's the way that government works sometimes. We are a body, and we have to act that way. Okay, and tonight's what happened at the agenda is inexcusable, all of us. I should never have to question whether we have an agenda. And everybody's got their pet peeves. Okay, everybody's got their pet peeves on things, but we have got to act and look like a body that wants to progress. And this fire station topic, I don't know why it's driving everything else sideways. It shouldn't. We're gonna come out of this with a better fire station than we have had in this community for the last 25 years. Okay? And we didn't mislead anybody. We didn't mislead anybody at all. Anybody could have called me or anybody else who was running or not running about the ballot language. We almost unanimously agreed on what the ballot language was that we voted on 1 year ago today. We put on the ballot to ask the voters for 8.4 million. I didn't vote for that sign. The sign, I thought that sign up on the corner was a bad idea the minute it was proposed. But you know what? 4 people voted for it, maybe 5 did. I think 4 people voted for it. So what do you do when 4 people vote for it, something? Do council gave a direction, and you work with it. Now, it might have been more fair to put 2 signs up. Seems obvious that the current fire station should always be considered as a location, but maybe we should put a second sign. Nonetheless, we've come a long way. We've come out of committees. This topic started in a committee. It got buried in a committee. We've taken out of committees. Was discussed for a couple of years across a couple of different councils. And we are where we are today together. And we're gonna need everybody to keep this going in a positive direction. So I'm excited about the fact that as soon as potentially the next meeting, if not the August 14th meeting, it'll likely be the one later in August. We're gonna have some numbers to look at from Cunningham Webb and Partners in Architecture, that set of consultants that we've hired to help us as representatives. And we're gonna need everybody's dialogue at that point. And we need it to be constructive. We all need to be thinking that way. So I'm sorry, it's sounding on a soapbox, but we have to work together. And I've tried. There's things that I've ignored, stuff that's said. We all do that. We have to think about the greater good here. So I'm appreciative of the time on my report. Are there any council member reports under item J8? Okay, I'm looking over page 3 of the agenda. We have 7 consent agenda items that remain on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move we approve the 7 items on the consent agenda. Bills and payroll in the amount of $280,794.18. Dexter High School Student Council road closure permit request for the homecoming parade on October 6th, 2023. Senior services from Dexter Senior Center for an amount not to exceed $105,000. Water master plan to OHM advisors for an amount not to exceed $30,000. Award of services to update wastewater capacity study to place in Vandenbrink for an amount not to exceed $22,800. Purchase of collection box for chipper truck from Truck and Trailer Specialties Inc. for an amount not to exceed $9,945. And VC3 service contract for IT services in an amount not to exceed $6,574.08.
Thank you for that motion. Well done. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Aldag, thank you. Virgil, when you're ready, please call the vote to approve the 7 items on consent agenda.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Griffin. Yes. Michelle,
No.
Alday,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, unfinished business, we have 2 items. There's L1, it's consideration of award of City Hall monument sign. Johnson Sign Company for amount not to exceed $16,750. Is there someone who would like to make that motion?
Make a motion to award the City Hall monuments and Johnson Sign Company for an amount not to exceed $16,750.
Okay, motion by Senator Farrell, is there a second? Second, by Hubbard, thank you. Okay, Justin, would you like to make the comment, please? Or what?
Maybe I'll hand it off to Scott because he took the lead on the sign up.
So I believe the last time I signed in front of council was on May 22nd or 22nd meeting, while we still away. I sent first of all, in comments that we received from council. So since that point in time, we've had in our meeting with Johnson Sign Company, took in that feedback, made some adjustments to those signs, and we see updated sign design, $890. So that's, adding some, the address to the bottom, making it match more with some of the other elements of some of the Peace Park and Lions Park signs. And not getting that formalized proposal from Johnson Sign Company.
David.
Yeah, I might be missing something here. So I 96, there's a rendering of it being placed parallel to that side of the building, and it says the rationale that it can be seen from the multiple approaches to the building. I mean, when I just go to Google Street View, to me, it makes more sense to have it perpendicular to the building because the majority of traffic is going to be approaching on, not.
Yeah, so the issue with that is that with how the right of way, the side of the impede. So in order to stay out of like the road right of way, if you push it, kind of like parallel to the building, it's still angled enough to be able to be seen. And then it's just gonna be one sided versus right.
And there's no alternative location such that it can be placed perpendicular.
So I believe that after in our meeting, we did a walk kind of around the building a little bit. One of the things, it may have came out of council the last few meetings ago, it was kind of putting it so that it was kind of facing out towards the railroad tracks. And just kind of looking at kind of positioning with the sidewalk, however that is currently looking at one side of the building. It just made the most sense to kind of leave it parallel.
Wow.
So it is angled a little bit or it's not?
So based on how the building kind of sits, so the building is not exactly parallel to that road, the building is kind of like situated.
I guess if I look at the sidewalk, I can see that. It's just hard to tell from this picture. Also, does this guy come with it?
I can always ask, might be an update.
Yeah, see, as long as it doesn't exceed whatever number we have.
So are we not allowed to put sign right away?
We generally try to do our best to follow our own rules and regulations. And whenever it is possible to avoid putting it in the road right of way, we do so.
The ordinance requires a certain setback on the road. And so
We didn't have a negative setback?
the negative setback means the building.
How close is the right of way to the building on that side?
It's also at an angle and it comes very close to the corner of the building closest to the building.
Right.
Yeah, I guess, it's kind of difficult for me to support it, given, I understand the constraint. And I guess I could have taken a closer look before coming inside. I just feel like for the maximum utility and for the money you're spending on it, it would be better to be seen in the opposite orientation.
Yeah, so we looked behind the building, but then then you're really drawing attention to the rear of the building, which really doesn't look as attractive as the front of the building. And may cause people to think, oh, am I supposed to use the emergency exit here, Michelle's office as the front door? That may cause confusion. If you put it out closer to, Huron, I mean, then people at Third and Broad really don't see it. It's a challenging area, and then we did spend quite a bit of time walking it. So we think that this is the most reasonable location to place it.
Zach? Any consideration given to projecting sign?
Off the board.
What?
The ordinance doesn't allow it in DC. And this is started out. You know,
Right.
you're going to. One of the things you will be looking at as part of, the temporary fire station is going to be a community amendment anyway. So that would be something that would be everybody in talk.
Is it Rockland Road?
Rockland Road.
Rockland. That,
So, well, when I originally, in May, when we discussed this, I pointed out that aluminum sign cabinet, aluminum custom shaped top. That's a cheap commercial sign. It doesn't match the feel of other signs, so I can't support it, but I don't object to others supporting it.
Oh, this might be a dumb question, but like looking at the rendering, would it be like more cost effective just to like take a nice plaque and put it in between the four windows? Or does that like impair the view?
So I think that was the projected sign that also Michelle was talking about. Essentially mounting it up and projecting off the ring.
well, I thought he was talking about going out this way.
So that objective sign would come perfectly around the building. So you see it.
Right, so Owen's question is, could it's not like a flag?
I
Yeah,
thought it was.
Put it flat against the wall.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, is that possible?
Building on the side.
I have to imagine it'd be cheaper because maybe like the.
It is, you have the same, issue that are concerned of, getting at, how visible is it?
Yeah, because the building isn't parallel or perfectly parallel to the Broad Street, it's angled. So it'd be less visible from Third and Broad and more visible from.
What?
I should know this, but what kind of signage do we have near here, like, a wayfinding sign? It's like arrows, this thing's this way, the means that, you know what I mean? Do we have anything like that up there?
We do have, pole mounted, border trail signage along, Central Street.
Okay.
And I think, further down Broad,
Yeah,
but it's all, flag signage essentially.
Yeah.
That's mounted on the
but
brackets.
like, what about the one that we have for community park? What if we did something like that up at Third and Broad, or up at Third and Central? That was like City Hall this way. I mean, just a thought to alleviate the issue with this presentation of it being not visible enough.
You could do wayfinding signage on existing poles.
Questions, Rebecca? And well,
Just one, I mean, do we have any idea of how much one of those would cost? I mean, it shouldn't be that much, right? Yeah,
I mean, it probably, depending on how big you wanted it.
right.
It could be a couple hundred to a couple thousand.
Okay. Cause I don't wanna postpone this, but I do also have the concerns about the visibility. And that would really help me if we had that, but I was wondering how much that would cost. I guess as you guys have said, you guys look at all the options that are out there, so if this is the best we can do, I mean. Hopefully, maybe adding a wayfinding sign later would make it easier.
the wayfinder is a good idea. Okay, Josh, thanks for your work on this. I'm gonna ask Freddie to call the vote. We have a motion by Senator Farrell, second by Hogan.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Griffin,
No.
Gonzalez,
No,
Alday,
Yes.
Keel.
Yes. Motion carries. Unfinished business item L2, consideration of award of 2 mini split HVAC units. 8140 Main Street to Cunningham Link in an amount not to exceed 24,000.
I make that motion.
Thank you. All day.
Second.
Second by Senator, thank you. Okay, so I'll turn it over Justin to you and to Samuel.
So, at the last meeting, we indicated that, the, air conditioning unit, servicing the second floor of the existing fire station, stopped working, and so in an effort to, beat the heat, I spoke with Partners Architecture and Cunningham Lynn, and they proposed an option to install 2 mini split HVAC units, which would allow us to purchase the units immediately, get them installed, but then deinstall them and reuse them for whatever the new station ends up looking like. Council had some questions about the units. I asked Sam if he might be available to attend tonight, to be able to help answer any questions that you might have about the function of the units. As I'm not an HVAC specialist by any means, but you have the cut sheets for the individual units, and the individual units are commercial grade. The price does include installation, and both do both heating and cooling. So I don't know if council has any additional questions.
Zach?
yeah, it's still not clear if they're multi-zone or single zone. And the 17,700, that's. I can go order these same units for $3,000, both of them. So I'm curious, is it 3,000 for the units and 14,700 for the installation plus 1,500 markup? I'm not able to square that with what my experience has been looking at in these splits.
Good evening. My introduction, Sam Ashley, president of Cunningham. Nice to be with everyone tonight. I know this was on last month's agenda. Somebody from the engineering firm should have been here. We need to take it tonight. So I wanted to make sure we were here to address any questions. I think as Justin mentioned, these units are set up for heating and cooling, and actually from a commercial standpoint, so they will heat. The threshold is going to be able to provide heating of up to 70 degrees and a negative 15 degree Fahrenheit standpoint as well, provide cooling at 95 degrees of the control levels. The cut sheets that were sent over, when you look through those, they are single zone controls, both for the 12,000 BTU and single zone for the 30,000 BTU unit. The reason behind that, I think it's important to know the current existing fire station on the second floor is really broken into 2 separate areas. There's the multi-use day room, separate from that, there's the sleeping quarters. Historically, there was a rooftop unit that provided air conditioning only for the multi-use area, which is the larger of the 2 segments, and then a through wall residential unit that was providing cooling only. For the sleeping quarters. Both of those units are no longer working. Presently in that, I actually stopped by the station this afternoon. Presently within the station, there are inexpensive residential rolling air conditioner only units that are running constantly, but they are providing cooling. So it is an approach that's addressing the need, albeit not from the most energy conscious utilization was there. Heating for that space, there are 2 wall mounted units within that space. that are older, antiquated, however, historically have been able to service that bay. These 2 units that were proposed by the engineer are specifically designed based on their size, formatting, control layout to service in both occasions of what's being studied for the either renovation and addition of the fire station or the new build fire station in the same components within that space. One is the there are my notes. Within the SCBA room, which is where the 30,000 BTU unit will be housed. That is a room that isn't traditionally occupied by a staffed firefighter. It's a room that has temperature sensitive equipment. It's the purpose behind it being specified as a single zone coverage because that room is a confined room. As well as having that temperature sensitivity based on the heat output associated with the technical equipment that's in the area. The other unit, the 12,000 BTU unit, is planned and programmed to go in an adjacent work area. Again, that is not a constant occupied area. It's an area that firefighters will go in and work on various pieces of equipment to go with it. That's why they were specified by the engineer as single zone coverage. When you talk through, there's some questions I believe last month as it related to the pricing, what's there. I also picked up on a comment, I had to do the same thing. So I went online, I Googled the 30,000 BTU unit. There's a manufacturer that does residential units, Alpine home cooling. And it's interesting when you see the rate of the 30,000 BTU unit, it's right around $2,000 for that unit. And then you actually go to build it, to order it, you have to add on all the requirements to make it useful. You need to add on the communication wires, you have to add on the line set system, you have to add on the electrical whip that gets harnessed to the powered devices, which is both the condenser that goes on the roof, as well as the terminal unit that goes on the wall, disconnect, so on and so forth. You can go on. That total, when you get through that, is roughly around $5,000. Just buying the unit, getting it shipped, paying sales tax to a location. Then you do have to provide a labor for installation. The units we're getting will come with a 10-year coil and a 14-year parts warranty associated to those. Buying them online from a manufacturer, you get about half of that warranty associated to it. In addition to the cost to buy, install, and for mechanical contractors, fee and profit associated to it. Included within that number is also the disconnection of what's there, taking that down for the time period in which they're not being used within that facility, and then storing it for that duration so they can be put into the new location.
Well, with regard to that and the pricing, so you said that what you would find online for a cheaper price is a residential unit. So I would assume that commercial unit is more off the bat, or is that incorrect assumption?
When you look at warranty of residential components versus commercial, the commercial warranty is twice the length. Logic would suggest that the parts and components within it are of a different testing ASTM standardization for that as opposed to residential.
And then one more question too, just because I'm not questioning, you know, I'm just trying to make sure I have an understanding. So there, we have a point here on Justin's memo saying that they're comparable. Okay, never mind. I was like, how are they compatible to other manufacturers?
Yeah, the Fujitsu units, it's a robust brand. There are other systems that are out there. The one that I went online and priced out of my own curiosity, it's a manufacturer for Blue Ridge. I frankly could not find a parent company or anything. Yeah, the company's ability to give us.
Thanks for going through all of that. I appreciate it. My understanding of the application of mini splits, I will admit, is somewhat limited, and my understanding is that they're typically used in a situation when your integrated HVAC system can't properly service the area, and it's kind of not necessarily a Band-Aid approach, but it's a less ideal approach than having an integrated HVAC. Maybe that's not the right premise to be understanding this from. I understand there's a current need in the building as it exists. I'm curious to know, as mentioned, that we would be able to use these again in a possible new building or renovated building. I would be curious to understand in what context we would reuse these, if in fact it is the case that mini splits are typically used only when there's some inadequacy to the existing HVAC system, which I would hope we would be able to remedy if we are going through the effort to renovate and or build something new. So I'm curious to know, given the uncertainty about what might happen there, how we think we would be using these.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Typically mini splits, when you look at new projects, are used either from a cost performance standpoint, it is less expensive than buying a packaged rooftop unit or ground mounted unit. Ideally, they're used for cooling of equipment in non-occupied spaces. I see there's one in this room. My guess is because people have been involved in the construction, it was probably a very cost-effective application for this room. The areas that these two units are designed to go, the 30,000 BTU unit is designed to go into the SCBA room. So that is an area where the air tanks, oxygen tanks are filled and stored. So it's not an occupied room and it has a person in there doing traditional work. It's really an equipment room that equipment is very temperature sensitive. A lot of applications and office uses will put them in a server room. Very similar practice to where the server racks need to be at certain temperature points. They don't overheat. It's not an occupied space in the sense that people are working in there on a time frame. So both of those units, as specified out by the engineer, are meant to go into spaces in either version. Because those two rooms, the workroom and the SCBA room, are both in both programs that are there. They're both equipment-based rooms, not necessarily admin space or day quarters. So it is an attempt to take something long-term, place it into the day quarters and the sleeping rooms that are there. To know the previous system that has failed, would not meet today's standards of design that would bring in fresh air to that space. So they were living in that condition for quite some time. Those units fail. This is at least an application to allow units that will have an intended specific purpose downstream to take place.
So were this not happening now, the building as it currently exists, it's highly likely that in whatever new version we'll be seeing a mini split would be considered as the default option because that is the preferred application in certain contexts?
No, they would have some form of either boiler chiller system with a fresh air ventilation system that gets put into their day quarter admin spaces. It's a unit that's designed to be an occupied space and meet fresh air requirements. So in the new proposed renovated or whatever, or whichever option you look at, the occupied spaces by firefighters and staff will have a very different system than a mini split system.
Right, but there would be other spaces in that building where the first choice would be a mini split,
Correct.
and that's where we'd be repurposing.
Correct.
Got it, thank you.
Well, yeah.
No, that was, I just wanted that clarification.
Okay, great. Zach.
Just I wanted to clarify, because it's not in the memo we've got, the 24,000 includes installation of the new units, decommissioning of the current units, and removal of these units for installation of the new site. Is that correct?
Let me just clarify that to make sure we're saying the same thing. So this proposal is to buy those two units, the 12,000 and 30,000 BTU units, install those same units to unhook, take those down, repackage them at the time frame of the building being constructed and store during that duration.
Okay. So the current ones are outside of this, they stay there.
They'll be removed during the demolition of the building. The current through wall unit is anyone can take it out of the window, shut the windows permanently there. The condensing unit that's on the roof, there will be some selective environmentally capturing demolition that takes place in the grand project, and that's where any of the refrigerant within that condensing unit that's on the roof that's not working to be captured.
Our fire chief has raised his hand. Doug, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. I was just going to add to clarify a little more on Jamie's question. Sam hasn't quite been in all the discussions with the architect, but the location of the SCBA room and the tool room are fairly remote, and they're connected off the apparatus bay, and the apparatus bay will not be air conditioned. So this is a way, without having to run HVAC ductwork the whole length of the building, to provide that cooling necessary in those working spaces independently from the living and office space on the opposite end of the building. So that was another reason that the mini splits were talked about right from the beginning of both the renovation plan and the new build plan have those areas located on the far end of the apparatus bay, on the opposite end of where the rest of the occupied spaces of the building will be.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate the attending tonight and helping you verify. Good to see you in person. Clerk, please call the vote. We have a motion by Alday, second by Salvatore.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Alday,
Yes.
Keel.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. On to new business. First business item is consideration of storage unit tax amendments as recommended by our planning commission. I can give a motion in a second. We can have a session.
I'll move there's suggested motion that pursuant to section 2303C of the city industrial zoning ordinance based on the recommendation of the planning commission. Along with the information presented by staff, city council approves 1580-2302. Tax amendments and zoning ordinance, article 2 definitions, section 2.2 definitions, article 5. Access parking located sidewalks, section 505, section schedule of minimum number of parking spots by use table, and section 10.10 non-residential district use table, subsection B, and article 14 specific.
Okay, so you have moved motion A, page 110 of the packet?
Yeah, to approve.
To approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Howard, thank you. Okay.
So, excuse me, this is, you've seen this before, it was a much more, regulated, proposal. The planning commission narrowed it down and focused it. So, if the planning commission conducted their public hearing on July 11th. If the amendment to Article 2 provides definitions for self-storage facilities, the drive-up self-storage facility type, climate-controlled self-storage facilities, as well as climate-controlled facilities that are mixed use. Article 5 is amended for section 5.05 for the minimum number. Currently, there are no parking standards regarding self-storage uses, and remember, self-storage uses are listed as permitted uses in the new ordinance in both the I1 and the RD district. So this helps correct that. It identifies one space for each 100 storage units with a minimum of 5, and then it has a clarifying requirement that access to self-storage unit shall be provided, or it shall provide for loading and unloading of vehicles without impeding that through traffic. That's a convenience for people who are there, at the same time, but also ensures that there's no blocking of any public safety vehicles should there be that need. Amendment to section 10, excuse me, to that table. That's the specific one that corrects these uses instead of being permitted. They're special uses. Excuse me. And then it amends Article 14 to create a specific section, 14.39 for self-storage uses. And these are the general development standards. And I'll just sort of briefly go through them. It outlines an intent. That's always important to have when you have your ordinance. And then the general provisions for sites that have the drive-through, drive-through not being permitted adjacent to or across the street from residentially zoned property. The yard setbacks of the I-1 and RD district need to be complied with, except that the setback between the building between buildings can be 25 feet, and that ensures compliance with the 25 feet or as required by fire code. That way we're ensuring that we're not making something too narrow and a fire truck can't get through, or conflict with the ordinance where you set up the minimum width, but we don't have that language about fire code, and fire code requires a place. So this covers both. Maximum lot coverage of all buildings shall not exceed 40%. The word buildings is added because our engineering standards deal with total impervious surface. So that's your buildings and your impervious concrete asphalt set it up. Maximum length of any building not being more than 150 feet. No outdoor storage of buildings is permitted. And then premises limited to storage and not for operating of other businesses. So somebody couldn't come in and operate a car repair business or a hobby workshop. This is a storage facility. Landscape screen in accordance with section 6.11A, screen number 3. It didn't make sense to regurgitate the language that's already in that. So it's a set to that particular, a reference right to that section. And that's the section for screening for industrial adjacent to residential. So it's the maximum screening, regardless of whether they're adjacent to residential or not. Exterior lighting, subject to the requirements of 311 of the ordinance. It does allow for a security manager as an accessory use. The aisles, parking areas required specific draining for our engineering standards. There is an allowance for limited retail for products, services, and also close to job creation. Access to the self-storage restricted to tenants only. Excuse me. Either by the use of an attendant, some type of mechanical or electronic device. Fire hydrants and fire suppression provided for code. Building height of structures other than in manager's quarters can't exceed the 15 feet in height. And storage facilities, including storage buildings and security managed office, need to be architecturally designed so as not to have a flat roof. The standards are similar for the climate control, but they may be permitted adjacent to a residentially zoned property because of that mixed use component. That's commercial, first floor and your storage above, excuse me, or vice versa. But it still has to be a special land use, but only also as an adaptive reuse. Building setbacks, again, they have to comply, no outdoor storage. We've added the recreational vehicles in this one. I thought that I had added that in the other one. I would ask you to make sure that you amend the motion to stipulate the same restriction on outdoor storage that it can't have recreational vehicles or boats. again, can't maintain, or repair vehicles, recreational equipment, or other items in these units. Again, limited storage, retail use would be allowed, same landscape screen requirements, same lighting requirements. Excuse me, same requirements for, drainage, fire hydrant, fire suppression. Maximum building height can't be more than the district that it's located. The exterior building walls must be finished with brick or other high-quality masonry material. Demonstrated means of security and management. I have the lighting in twice, so we would only want it in once, my apologies. And then if the site consists of both a drive-up facility and a climate control, the minimum site size is 5 acres, and each use is subject to the conditions for each of those types. I believe council is fairly fluent on the text amendment procedure. Planning Commission holds public hearing, makes a recommendation, council takes final action. The review criteria is listed, and this is the same criteria that the Planning Commission considered. This is a previous discussion that was done in 2021 when a storage facility was looking at coming in and reusing a particular building that was, excuse me, zoned I-1, but at that time, storage facilities were not a use that was in any district. Going through that process, the Planning Commission did determine that self-storage uses were appropriate in the I-1 district, but as a special use. But because we were also going through the zoning ordinance update and the specific request was limited to the I-1 district, they felt that the zoning ordinance subcommittee should deal with any other districts that the use should be in. There was discussion that it should be by the Planning Commission that self-storage could go in the R&D, but it should also be a special use. But due to an oversight, it came in as a permitted. This amendment does correct that. Excuse me. The other criteria that is applicable here is that it promotes the goals and objectives of the master plan, and I've outlined those for you in the report. And then some additional goals in the master plan that this particular amendment would address. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments you might have.
So I've got a few, I think. So the term drive up, you have to drive to get to it. You drive through,
Right, you're driving
parking,
up, you're driving up to your unit.
Okay, so the climate controlled self-storage, you park in front of a building and then go into a building?
Correct.
And those are all in the building?
In the building, yep.
Okay, so. What's the logic? That doesn't allow me to store a kayak?
So you can store a kayak inside your unit. You cannot store it outside your unit. That's why no outdoor storage.
So when you say the use of the premises, you don't mean inside the unit? And that,
Which one are we talking about specifically?
well, I'll start with 2A, Roman numeral 6.
Okay.
So it says for sites consisting of a drive-up storage facility, the following use requirements shall apply. And then it says, except as provided here in the use of the premises, which I was assuming was the unit.
We can
Shall not be
tweak that language so it's clearer. The use of the premise shall be limited to store, it should say storage within the building. Not for operating any other businesses, maintaining or repairing vehicles. excuse me, including not limited to recreational vehicles and boats. That's the part for the repair portion. No outdoor storage, no storage outside of the building shall be permitted. That's the part. There is no clarifying, qualifying. Storage is inside, nothing's outside.
Yeah, that, well, the prior sentence is no storage outside of the building shall be permitted.
Right.
So I was assuming that the next thing was related to inside. So can I put a kayak in there?
You can put a kayak in your unit.
Is
cannot
that
put-
considered a recreational vehicle or a boat? Or I guess not?
I'm sorry?
By definition, a kayak isn't a boat?
It's, yeah, it's a boat. That's why it says including but not limited to. We could have a very.
I thought the including was what's not allowed.
For maintaining and repair.
Right, for maintaining, this is the 6 has to do with,
You can't fiberglass your kayak.
you can't have a rest kayak, you can't have a workshop
Yeah,
over
but
there.
that language is very misleading to me.
Okay,
But
except as
if
other,
everybody else is reading it okay, then I guess I'm maybe on the outside there. And these are all special use then?
this is all special use. So you have your special use criteria, those 6 or 7 mandated by state law for
Yeah.
special uses. And then these additional development standards for the specific use.
That number 6 is confusing to me. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I'm fine when I have lists like this, to use semicolons to separate, when there are also these subclauses that have commas. I don't know if we were to add, except as provided here on the use of the property shall be limited to storage only and shall not be used for operating any other business. Semicolon, because that seems like that's one complete thought. For maintaining or repairing of any vehicles, recreational equipment, including but not limited to recreational vehicles and boats, or other items, and then semicolon. Or because so the first one you're talking about, you can't operate a business. The next one, you can't maintain or repair these vehicles with that list. And you can't use it for any recreational activity, hobby or purpose. So it seems like there are 3 sort of sub clauses which themselves have sub clauses. And so I wondered if they were offset by semicolons, it would make it easier to read.
Yeah, if they're bolded or something different, that's separate.
Like, or like a 1 in, round friends
Right.
or something. So people can tell that like it's not this big run on.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay, we can fix that.
Third of the sentence to that. Right.
I have a question in that same section, Michelle, so to a, 1, where it specifically calls out drive-up self-storage not being permitted adjacent to or across the street from residentially zoned property. I was just curious the rationale there, and then why not any self-storage? Is it?
I'm sorry.
So drive-up self-storage is specifically called out as not being permitted adjacent to or across the street from residentially zoned property. But we also in this ordinance define climate-controlled self-storage and then climate-controlled self-storage facilities and mixed use. So my read of that is that drive-up is not allowed adjacent, but these other 2 types would be allowed adjacent.
So
And I just wanted to understand. the difference.
the climate control could, but mixed couldn't, because mixed would have drive up, so it's only the climate.
And so the rationale is that.
But also again, it's an adaptive reuse.
What about the adaptive reuse?
Mixed use climate controlled facilities may be permitted adjacent to residentially zoned property only as a special use and if adaptive reuse.
So could climate control be allowed if not adaptive reuse next to?
Not next to residential. But elsewhere in the I1 or RMD district.
Okay, so nothing is allowed next to residential unless it's adaptive reuse.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
So Michelle, the gentleman that proposed the storage units that you had in your report,
Right.
for the first property in the industrial park, RD, right?
Yeah.
He was suggesting that there's a demand because more people work from home, that they need space for things that they can't fit in their garage.
Mhm.
i.e. that to help their work from home business. Yet this language says that you can't use these for operating any other business. How is that something that we oversee?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question. The purpose of the storage unit is for people to store things they don't have room to store in their house, or their apartment, or their business. So they can do that in the storage unit.
It can be a tool shed for a carpenter who operates out of his home.
It could be, he could.
That's different than the language that says the use of the premises shall be limited to storage only and shall not be used for operating any other business.
So you can store your tools. If you're a carpenter in that storage unit, doesn't mean you're operating a business out of it. So you're not building anything there, you're not running your office out of there. You may just have your equipment there, but you're not using your equipment there. It's a subtle difference, but.
I like that.
The language isn't good, but that's my read of it, okay.
To that point, and where I work, on my personal side, where I work out of a location, we set up a storage area. We go there every day, you know, to use that storage area. So I mean, I guess.
What are you using the storage area for? To pick up-
Tools, like.
Right, you get your tool or tools,
Right.
and you leave, and then you may come back and deposit your tools.
But, so the intent of that portion of the ordinance, I mean, granted, you don't want somebody to set up shop, right, or be in line, but it would seem that part of the intent would also be that you're not having regular traffic in and out there. Which you could conceivably have, I mean, the parking is limited. I don't know, do they put any kind of restriction on that, like you can't come in every day or?
No.
Okay.
Zach, sorry for.
Would you prefer questions or comments first?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. If someone owned a warehouse style business where they had stock and they shipped it, would they be able to keep their stock here?
Like tools, they could.
Like European hosiery that they import and sell online?
There's a gray area in here. If you don't want somebody operating their business out of it. Excuse me. If we don't want people to use it as the place for their equipment or the use for somebody storing merchandise that they may not be selling yet, or they're just whatever it is for, they can't keep it at their own place, then we would have to write this a slightly different way.
Personally, don't see the problem with the way that it's written. Because I don't think we can start regulating who can leave their tools in there and who can't. We don't know. You know, I mean, if they gotta get them one day and put them back 3 days later, or they need them once a month, that's not operating a business. Neither, in my mind, neither is storing merchandise. Unless you're sitting there making transactions or building things or repairing things, then you're not operating a business. I mean, I don't know, I think,
I'm just trying to understand the intent of the words.
I also think though, hold on, one other thing, sorry. I think the thing we're not thinking about too is, I really don't think like anybody who's owning and operating self-storage wants people running businesses out of their units. So I don't really think it's got a potential to be this huge problem.
But that's not the impression the gentleman that was at the pre-app gave. he suggested that people who have
I know what you're saying.
gone away from working somewhere else, which is having the home element that they need space for whatever part of their business, and it would be a regular thing, and to Joe's point, you know, I think of these. Historically, I would think of these more as a long-term storage thing. Hey, I got this whole piece of furniture and I want to put it there, because I don't need it to have room in my house. You know, I'm not gonna go there every day, but I'm just asking, what's the vision? Is that what we want? Is it okay that people access their locker every day?
I don't think we can record
That's
that.
why I asked it, but did that not come up with planning commission?
No, it wasn't talked about that particular way. It was talked about in a way that Juan, discussed. We didn't talk about it in the short term. There wasn't a concern that somebody would go in every day to the locker. To the point you made about the gentleman, that's part of the reason. The intent of this isn't that somebody's operating a business. But I can see that that's broad and people are having trouble wrapping their arms around it. But the other thing that we're working with the gentleman on is, in order to provide a business with a small office space and space for them to store equipment, merchandise, whatever. That's why he's looking at, doing that business condo type, like it's already in the park. That's the one that Dave used. It runs vertical or runs perpendicular.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Sam, did you have your hand up? That's okay.
I do.
Okay, all right, Jamie,
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think it's fair to try to anticipate any unintended consequences, stemming from wording and potential unclarity from that, and I think the reason why is, you know, I agree with why, you know, not necessarily inclined to highly regulate things like this. At the same time, and I apologize for calling out a specific business, but Noble Appliance in the Dexter Crossing Plaza, the last I knew is functionally I mean, that building is functionally being used as a warehouse for a primarily online business. And you know, there's potential of somebody like that who could be running their online business from their home, from a co-working space, is using the self-storage as a warehouse for all of their merchandise that's being bought and sold online. They're not, you know, setting up office there, but they're storing that like a warehouse. And maybe, you know, I think that's less ideal in a plaza like Dexter Crossing, where you're hoping to have foot traffic and actual indoor, out-the-door retail sales. Maybe something like that unintended consequences is okay in the industrial park. I think it's a question of what are our goals from the industrial park, and to what extent can and should we regulate to achieve those goals. And then also, I do think we have to be very mindful of possible negative impact on the adjacent residential areas, understanding that business park was placed there before some of the surrounding residential areas. But at the same time, given that changes are happening there, I think to the extent that we can improve the living conditions of our 24/7 residents, I think that should also be a priority too. So things like, you know, what is happening immediately adjacent to these residential properties, I want that to be top of mind. And I understand that's the goal of having something as a special land use, is that there's that additional layer of scrutiny to help perhaps achieve some of that greater harmony with these adjacent land uses. So I don't know, I'm certainly open to considering, again, possible unintended consequences, what it might mean for different uses. So I appreciate the conversation. I guess that's all I can say. I'm not sure that I have a conclusion based on all of that, except to say that I think it's relevant, because once something goes in, it's much harder to undo it.
If you don't mind, to James' point real quick, you could add a line for each of the different uses or the different facilities, that warehousing and or distribution shall not be permitted, or use of the storage facility or warehouse and distribution of for private business is not permitted. or shall not be permitted. Language to that effect.
I guess I was interested in knowing whether the planning commission had talked about that or not. If
They had not.
if they haven't, then I guess I think I'd rather hear their opinion than add it myself. But that was what I was getting out of the one person that brought a real plan in front of us, was referring at least to me.
Right, I understand where you're coming from.
I realize you're trying to steer them towards something different, but
Yeah,
that might still yield whatever, but I think it still goes to the heart of the question.
it does, and I think the planning commission would be okay if that was language that council felt needed to be put in. Because even though they may not have thought of, excuse me, the short-term use of, using a rental unit for storing tools or merchandise. That doesn't mean that they would necessarily be against council wanting to tighten that up to ensure that didn't happen.
So for me, there is the part of, and I wasn't sure of the gentleman who brought the plan of, was it the used for business purposes, or was it used for example, if somebody's operating now a business from their home, that they might need to store their home stuff in there, right? Like many of us have started working from home after, during the pandemic, and then we have continued working from home. In our home, we had to turn 2 spaces into office area, and we were grateful that our basement had room, even though my husband sits at the middle of boxes in the basement, that's his office now. But for us, I understand that if people don't have that space and all of a sudden are working from home or, have to turn a space into something else, that this becomes a place to store their maybe household stuff if the business is operating from their home. From that perspective, I think there are a lot of variables to that, but I do like what Michelle mentioned in adding that language that it should not be used for warehouse or distribution center. I think that kind of helps with some of the concerns we have. And at the same time helps if somebody has a business in their home but wants to store their books in the storage area. That's just-
Zach?
Yeah, I have a couple more questions. Can I store hazardous or flammable materials?
No, the fire department, they were viewing anything that comes through, and that would be something that fire would deal with.
Okay. Our fire code is good, old now too, so that's a whole other thing.
It is, but he does have the ability, there is some subjectiveness that he is, because it's health, safety and welfare, can look at newer codes to be able to.
If I wanted to have a drive up with my own entrance or build a facility, and I wanted to allow for climate control, would that be a use variance or developmental variance?
I'm not sure. I'm understanding.
So right now it says the only way you can do climate control is if it's one entrance that everyone goes through, basically, right? What if I wanted to provide that climate control for your individual stuff? I have a wooden boat, it wants to be in climate control, humidity and temperature throughout the year. Would doing that with separate entrances be considered a use variance or developmental variance? I'm trying to
not
figure-
able to visualize what you.
I want to have my own door that I can put something that's climate and humidity controlled in. Right now, I can't do that. You have to drive up facility with your own door on the exterior.
Mhm,
You can't climate control it.
correct.
But if I wanted to do that,
But if you had. That. I'd have to think of that.
Okay, that's
Think
fine.
about that.
That's okay, you can think, I break the code, that's what I do. And I would be supportive of tightening down the warehouse and distribution, because the impact of those types of uses are significantly different than typical self-storage. I would prefer to have that language in there as opposed to relying on a property owner preventing it, because these could be done as a condominium where people own their individual unit, and then there's greater flexibility for there. All right, I will jump into quick comments then.
So I want to go back to the question that you asked earlier. If you look at 2B8, all access aisles, parking areas, walkways, graded drain. So if somebody wanted to do a climate control facility that was drive up, that would work there too. If we have to tighten language up to make that clear, we can do that.
I think it entails the definition, then
Okay.
the definitions for the drive up without humidity control. So if that's the direction we want to go, we have to make that definition.
But climate control, just, I don't need to be argumentative, that are primarily accessed from a common interior space, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way.
Okay. Okay, so a couple of little detail stuff, because details you have when you're doing stuff. So the definitions throughout here, there's which instead of that. I would switch the whiches to that, because that is restrictive clause. It means that thing needs to be there in order for the whole thing, whereas which is a non-restrictive clause, which is kind of like additional information that may or may not, again, a very nerdy thing. Let's see.
That's in the definition you're proposing?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, and generally whenever I see which in a zoning ordinance, I rip it out as fast as possible with that. Under section 14.39(1) intent, I'd recommend striking comma as a special land use. We already defined that it's a special land use in use table, and when we do a multiplication, we can do weird stuff in future as you do amendments. Under 2A, Roman numeral B, I would flip the order of that sentence. I don't like it when the subject is no. It should be something like storage shall only be in the buildings, or storage is not permitted outside of buildings, just so it's a bit more clear and people don't have to do stuff. We've talked about the semicolons to separate the items under 2A BI. Under Roman numerals 2A 7, 8, and 9. Just for consistency, it seems that it happens most often in our ordinance that we say section 6.11A of this ordinance. Here it kind of goes back and forth with this zoning ordinance, and so generally it seems most consistently of section whatever of this ordinance. So I would do that consistently throughout. This section in our zoning ordinance in general isn't consistent with how it treats series comma or the Oxford comma. So the last comma before the and. 2AX, for example, it doesn't have a comma between parking areas and walkways. And I think it's important that we keep the series comma in there. There have been millions of dollars lost because the comma wasn't in there. Under X, also, I would just change it with the city standards and specifications. We define the city of Dexter in the ordinance as the city. Under XIV, again, I would flip it to the maximum height shall be 15 feet instead of starting with the negative. 15, I think we can strike be architecturally designed so as not to have. Just, it shall not have a flat roof. Under B1 or BI, I'd strike as a special land use. Because it's extra information that could conflict with future changes. B3, I do similar structure to 2AV, where it says storage is not permitted outside of buildings. Just And then the 6, 7, and 8 will be similar to was mentioned before of this ordinance. And the II, again, the city standards and specifications. We find ourselves with drop down. On page 108, the XIII in section 3.11 of this ordinance.
That's duplicated. Yeah.
Yeah. And those are my little details. One thing that does pop up, I frequently hear at public hearings when storage is proposed is, was there any discussion about limiting the hours of access to the facility?
Planning Commission did discuss that. That was something that was in the draft that staff took to them, and they felt that it was not necessary to have that. Did I get that right? Oh,
So the original, they have a motion by Senator Farrell, seconded by Hubbard to approve A, where we had a significant amount of comments that I don't have written down or organized. And it makes sense to try and
Postpone.
just see it all and make sure it's the way we all, because there's a lot of input there.
I would make a motion to postpone if and only if all punctuation and other clarification of grammar and sentences is submitted to the community development manager prior to the meeting.
You submit what your comments to her. We can-
But if I don't, does that mean we have to travel back in time to vote tonight?
I don't know, I'm just trying
Okay,
to.
I'm not sure how Truth Water addresses that.
I would really just like to see the changes that have been proposed before I. Well, that's okay. I think that's important. All right, does anybody want to make a civil motion to postpone until the next meeting? Second by Hubbard. Postpone until, can we be ready for the August 14th meeting? Is it?
I can be ready for the August.
Okay, and anybody had a comment on suggested wording changes, let's get those to Michelle in the next week, if you're 2 weeks, please. Appreciate all the, all right, the motion by Michelle, second by Hubbard, don't want to go out, 15. Please call the vote.
Alday,
Yeah.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yeah.
Griffin,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your work on that, Michelle. New business item number 2. Consideration of council initiated charter amendment. Danielle,
Yep, I'll move to direct staff to prepare a draft resolution for the charter amendment listed on page 112 of the meeting packet for our next meeting on August the 14th.
yeah, August 14th, is there anything?
August 14th.
Second.
Second by Michelle, thank you. Okay, discussion? Yeah,
I want to begin by thanking members of the public who came to speak about this and those who sent emails. I want to thank members of council who are at the table with any willingness to at least entertain my thoughts on this item. I appreciate that. I also want to begin by saying, I think oftentimes there are disagreements kind of at this level of a conversation when really the disagreement is about the fundamental premise from which we are approaching that issue. So I'm inclined to think that everyone at this table has approached this topic and the process around the topic logically from the premise from which they approach their position on council. And so I just want to make it clear that even before joining council, it was my prerogative to increase the amount of public input on key decisions in front of council. That is a position I campaigned on. It was a position I was elected on. It's a position I have maintained in the past 2.5 years that I have been on council. And so it is from that fundamental premise, I guess, that I am bringing this to council in this manner. So I my formative experience as it pertains to involvement in local government came when I was a graduate student working at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And I was part of a group at the Public Policy Center that worked directly with the city of Lincoln, who felt very strongly about an approach to government called deliberative democracy, in which the public is very actively engaged. Their input is very actively and frequently sought out for things like development of the budget and other topics that are of great public interest. And so, again, I can appreciate that people approach either their role as a citizen or their role as an elected official from different perspectives. Some, it's a continuum. Some are set it and forget it. I voted for this person. I'll come back in 2 years when I have to vote for the next people. I'm going to fade into the back room. I'm going to live my happy life. That's their prerogative. Similarly, some elected officials might think I've been elected. That means I have a mandate for the next 4 years to do what I want to do, even if there was no clear campaigning on these issues. Who can anticipate all the issues that are going to come before them? Other people like myself think I'm going to actively, in an ongoing fashion, reach out to the public for their thoughts on matters that come before council. I did this early on with my own personal surveys to better understand what public thought about certain items that came before council. In my view, this is a community that is small enough where you can obtain meaningful public input on specific topics that come before council. So why I'm bringing this forward is because I did learn that there was a not insignificant amount of the public that was, I guess, disenfranchised with the way things happened with the vote in November. And, you can say, well, they were, misinformed. It was their obligation to be better informed about what the vote was in November. And, that can be your perspective. My perspective is potentially there's a win-win situation here where we actually put a direct vote about location, whether it's in the form of this parks related proposal or something more specific to an actual location. And is there a way to make it so everybody comes out whole, I guess is my motivation for bringing this forward.
I have some comments, but I also have a couple questions for Justin, if I
Sure.
may.
Go ahead.
The bonds are issued, the locations are attached to it. If that is not used to build the fire station, what happens to 8.4 or 8.3 million?
I'd have to confirm with our bond council. If council rules were to change, I'd have to get their opinion.
So some of my comments, and the reason I wanted to have a discussion, because as Sean mentioned earlier, to me, having the discussions are very important. I've had many of them regarding this issue with council members Michelle and Griffin in the past. In the voting of the location, when it came to council to vote, I voted for the new location. I still stand by what I said, that afterwards, when the vote was done, we moved forward for the community. Something that I also have heard from multiple community members, that it is important to keep our community. This issue is now becoming a very divisive issue, which shouldn't be. It's fire station. We are building, at the end, whatever is the result, it's a good result. And for the community members, our videos are up. If you look at them, there was a lot of discussion, and either location has its pros and cons. So one of my thoughts about this is that I really appreciate the members of the public that came and spoke tonight. A couple of them made the comment that they assumed with their vote that the location would be the new location or the map location. We sent a newsletter out in fall 2022, which goes to every single home in the city of Dexter. In that, there was a clear description of the ballot language. The two proposals for both locations were included. We had a public session conversation. And at least one of those who spoke tonight attended that session. I respectfully disagree with two of them that say they assumed the location would be the new map location, because I had conversations with them prior to November, and we had discussed both locations on it. So it was clear, at least with those two members, that both options were on the table. It is easy for us if every one of us has something in mind, instead of bringing to this body to take it and put newsletters or newspaper items and such out there, and not allowing this body to have a conversation. All of us are elected. We could have voted tonight of not having this discussion. I disagree with council members that put this on this agenda. But at least I think at the end of the day, we should have a conversation. The committee that has started the petition to the people, which now, because it is not gonna be until 2024, we see this item coming to us, put a lot of misinformation in their website. They actually invited me on early stages of their committee and requested my participation, to which I responded to them in email that I will not sacrifice our community and bring discord so we can change the location. And I don't believe our residents would appreciate that either. And I stand by that today. We talk about transparency. Council members talk about transparency and, as mentioned, grant on transparency. But when weeks after their filing of the committee of the Friends of Mill Creek Park, I waited and waited to see if they bring it up to council or publicly. They did not. I mentioned because the members of the community started asking me questions. But that I was the bad person because I spoke up, and they were very upset with me of revealing their plans. So it is very difficult for me to not see this as a step to want to pause things, to push this out down the road. One of the favorite phrases that was used was kick the can down the road. It will be more expensive to build. And at some point, we need to be able to respect the vote of this body. When we ran as council members, we didn't run individually in terms of one voice should run everything. Yes, we represent our constituents, we represent the people that voted for us. But at the end, we are one voice in this body. The letter to editor that went out mentioned that there was change of thoughts when the council changed in November. Any of us can put a motion on the table. Any of us could have put a motion to select a location before November. There were 4 votes for MAB location before November. The council members that are here, that were there in November as well, also chose not to bring that up. On the night we passed the ballot proposal language with almost everybody, we thought about putting a location and we did not put a location. But that item could have come up any other time during that time, and it was not brought up. We talked about the 2 locations possibilities until it came to the point that the vote was done. Many people attended it. All our videos are up. All our minutes are up. It was in the newsletter. We had public speaking session. So it is very misinforming to say we try to keep this from public or manipulate public. It is easy to go and start writing things in newspaper, online, and not allow for a democratic conversation. I wanted this as a discussion versus consideration because we don't even know it. What are the possibilities for this? This is just yet another thing because the decision was not to the liking of people who are putting it. The current treasurer of the committee stood here in our last meeting in non-arranged participation at the end and clearly said that the intent of this petition is to stop building the fire station in the current location. Who is misinforming the public?
You're welcome. Well,
Briefly, I just want to say, no disrespect to those of you who are here tonight, thank you for coming, thank you for talking to us. I resent the implication. Let me back up. I understand that we all come here with different modes of operation, but I do have a problem with the idea that the people who are now talking to the public and bringing them here to talk to us about this issue are the only ones who matter. I mean, as Councilmember Albeck said, before November, we had the 4 votes for the new location. I was one of them. Then I thought about it more, got more information, talked to people, and I changed my mind. And I'm entitled to do that. Anyone at this table is entitled to do that. Anyone in the audience is entitled to do that. There were so many chances that we all had to do something like this before November. So what I have a problem with is that it only occurred after certain people didn't get what they wanted. Because those people had the exact same chance as the rest of us to get the public out before November to talk about the fact that they wanted a location of the bond language, to talk about which location they wanted. But this is after the fact, and this is muddying the waters, and this is misleading the public, and it's making us look like crazy people. So also, like Councilmember Aldag said, it's not worth it. It's a fire station. What are we doing? What I ran on is, we just need to get things done, okay? We're sitting in this building. I made the motion to put that forward, not saying, I'm not taking credit for it, but I have come through on that promise, because I'm not gonna sit here at this table and let us fight at the expense of the community and not getting things done. So we shouldn't be talking about this fire station in this way right now. We should be having productive conversations as a whole about where we're going next and what we're working on next for the thing that we've already voted on and that the people have already authorized, whether or not they
have the full information that they needed when they walked in the ballot box. And again, no disrespect, I've done it myself. I've walked in, I've made votes that I regret, and I've lived with them. That is democracy.
There,
So I'm reminded of the adventures with the street going through Monument Park. And although not working memory of all the details, council trustees at the time made a decision that was significantly out of step with the community. And that had significant reverberations. This is an opportunity. There are significant numbers of the community who are very displeased. They're to the effect that they volunteer their time to go out door to door. It's not an insignificant number of people who signed this. There could have been significantly more people who signed the charter amendment. This doesn't put a break on it. This is the way to accelerate it and get it out there. And if let the people. That's all.
Fine.
One last thing to say in light of that. I don't deny that there are a significant number of people who want it at the new location. There are also a significant number of people who want it at the current location. There are also a significant number of people who don't give a crap where it goes as long as we get it done. We put a survey out, sponsored by the city, not by any one of us individually, and we asked a specific question about location. It was very split, very much half and half. If you go back, it's hard to even, some of them it's hard to interpret. I went through it 5-6 times myself, trying to decide, oh, is it, 30 for this and 30 for that, or 31, which one does this person really want, but it's not that simple. There's not like a 80% block of people who want it at the new location. It's just not true.
No. So I'm not in favor of the motion and, or the idea, behind it. I would not have signed the petition had I had the opportunity. I will say that the current location, I mean, there's a lot of history that goes into it, but no one has ever said that our fire department has not served our community well from the current location. In fact, that location used to serve a significantly larger, it's got to be something close to 70 square miles out of that station. There's that location will work for the needs of our community. There may be opinions about whether the other location is better. Like the current location is better. And that's really what we have here. I mean, it's not like you can go through and quantitatively come to a number and say, this one's a 57 and this one's a 42, so we should go with the 57. It just isn't there. The current service is good and will be better with a better station. There never was a discussion about using where the fire station is as a park prior to the ballot, prior to the discussions we had, and prior to when the first motion was made in order to put the fire station at the current location. We didn't have that discussion at all. We don't have the funds to raise the building if we were to do that. We don't have the funds to make it into a park if we do that. There are some designs on it. It's been indicated that our capital improvement plan has money that's indicated for the park, but the capital improvement plan is not funds spent. It's a long list of funds that could potentially be spent. And as Councilmember Hubbard said, we have gotten public input over time, a lot of it. We've had a lot of discussions. I mean, I remember a few years ago, probably 5, 6 years ago, going to the library, having a large meeting there at that time with a lot of people that were there. And there, as was mentioned, there's opinions on both sides. This has always been a hot topic because it's pretty split. You know, if 80% of the people thought it was gonna go one way or the other, generally you don't have a lot of discussion about it. They just go that way. What this comes down to is a difference of opinion. It could have gone one way, it's gone this way. The fact of the matter is that's how we legislate, that's how we get things done, and that's how we move forward. And how it used to be, and, you know, it's been said that, and it's been said by me, that in the past, it wasn't like this. The reason it wasn't like that was because of what Mayor Keough said. You get to a point, you have the discussion, you have the vote, whatever it is, say, okay, let's get to work, do whatever it is. We've even had discussions where we've gone back and forth. I think it was Eaton Court, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was Eaton Court that there was a 4-3 to not do Eaton Court. And the next meeting we came back, had another discussion, and it switched over, and it was 4-3 or 5-2 to do Eaton Court. It wasn't like it was this, it was back and forth, it was in the middle, it was the same type of thing. It didn't go on for as long as this went on, but this is a difference of opinion, and I have said over and over and over again, and I know I've heard Councilmember Alday, Councilmember Hubbard, and Mayor Keough, I know I've heard them say, I understand what the attraction is for that site. I understand how that would work. I get it. I'm not saying that's not a good choice. It's just that the decision was that they like this one, and also, I'm sorry, he's not here, Councilmember Schwab also said the same thing, that was the site they wanted, and I apologize, you did say that you would vote for the other spot, so. But that was the decision, that was the vote that it was, and we can't stop and decide we're gonna put everything up to a vote. That's not how it works. That's just not how the government works. That's not how we've ever worked. And Mr. Michels is right. There were severe consequences when people wanted to put the road through the park. That was an 80-20 type of a situation. And, you know, there was consequences to that. If there's consequences, then I'm happy to deal with them because I firmly believe that this is the best decision because of the location and because of how it would change how the fire department would have to move through the city. And nobody else would pay that price in our city except the people in our city. The people in the townships don't. I think that's the best for the people in our city. Yeah.
So council had made a decision at one point to designate 8140 as a continuing site. That was a 4-3 vote that you just recently referenced. And then it was sometime later, after council became aware of the charter amendment, that council voted to tie the bond monies to 3 specific addresses, intentionally excluding Meadowview. We had received legal input that there was no requirement to tie addresses to the bond. So I just would like to give anybody an opportunity who voted in that direction to explain the rationale for that vote.
So I can't tell the chat about faster. So now,
Yes, I did vote in that direction and I would be happy to explain why. One was that, yes, there was no restriction, but it would give us better rating for our bond issuance if the locations were attached to it. So that was one reason that I voted for it. The other reason I voted for it was that, to me, was the decision of the location was done. We were moving forward. And that was another process in that to move it forward. And to me, that was very important to have as well, and show that if the decision is done and we are moving forward, then we move forward. But one of the main things for me was that better rates, that could potentially bring us if the location was attached to the bonds.
I'm not gonna repeat what I said about how much we've discussed this and how much public input we've heard. But I voted to attach that language for two reasons. One, like I said before, I ran on this and I came here to make sure we get things done for the community. The other thing is, if we hadn't added the language, we wouldn't have been able to spend the money here to use this location and the DPW as potential flex space for temporary facilities while we're building or renovating the station. And if we just put those two addresses on it, then that wouldn't have worked either. So we did, I feel, what we had to do to keep the process moving and give our firefighter a better station, period.
And I'll conclude the comments because I think everybody's had a chance to say what they want to say. My goal is to keep this moving forward. I've had people call me this weekend after having seen the article in the paper thing. I didn't even start to read it last week, so I didn't even read it until today. But I had people point it out to me and tell me how it bothers them that as a body, we can't find a way to move forward. And I want to help that healing process. I've said that before. We are a good group. We're a smart group. We work together. There's a lot of good input here and a lot of good ideas. We have to be willing to work with each other though. And I'm not going to vote in favor of this council initiated charter amendment or the suggestion, or I don't even need to see the draft language. We have set the ball rolling in a positive direction. There are many people that are supportive of the current location and getting this done. They want to see us move on to other topics like the trailhead and continued street projects and other things instead of talking about this. I know it's a hot topic. I know it's easy to put in the paper buzzwords, and every article has a great, little catchphrase, something there that gets you going, because that's what you do in the paper and the media, to try to get people's interest. But the fact remains that this council and the majority of people on this board have done a really good job of taking a topic that was nowhere and putting it somewhere for the people of Dexter. Okay, we now have a plan. We have an architect. We have a construction manager that we got to meet tonight here in person. Our public safety committee has been meeting for, I don't know, the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it is. All 7 of us are going to get a chance to look at those renovation ideas and the new build idea and critique it and offer comments and ask questions about it and learn why rooms are next to other rooms or why things are like what came out tonight, why there's no ductwork plan to go across the building to the areas that are on the far side of the apparatus bay, whatever it is. Those are the kind of conversations that this community expects us to have to move this forward and get this done. So I'm not gonna vote. Let's see draft language. Georgia, there's a motion on the table, by Griffin, second Michelle's. For the last page, I think of Jamie's. Paper down page 113, the draft staff of the paragraph of resolution for the above mentioned federal amendment for the next meeting. And I'd like you to call the vote on that.
Waldeck,
No.
Hubbard,
No.
Sunny Pharaoh,
No.
Michelle's,
Yep.
Griffin, yes, Keo.
No. So that motion fails 4-2, and we have concluded our new business for the evening. I will say the next item up is non-arranged participation. So if anybody has stuck around and make comments, you're welcome to hear additional comments that are non-arranged. Yes, please.
Do you want me to repeat my information?
I think we got it, Jim. Don't we?
Okay. I want to correct something, Sean. I think I did you a disservice earlier. I do not want there to be any implication at all that you and I had any conversation where you tried to lobby me towards one station site or the other. I know where some people on the council stood on this, very clear. I have known you for a very long time. We've had lots of conversations as you walk around town. You have earned my trust. I have never once thought that you were acting in a way that didn't have the best interests of this village or then the city at heart. Ever. Not once.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay. So when we go out in the street and we start circulating petitions and making statements, and they're incomplete, manipulative, missing information, biased, I'll call them propaganda. I get a really different tilt on it. I have never had that experience with you, ever. Nor do I ever expect to. So I just heard you call for unity from this group, and in the vote, there was not unity. So people weren't persuaded in the end. I'm really glad that you voted this thing down. Want you to move ahead. It's time to move ahead.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, I want to thank the council for all the great questions about storage units. I happen to do small commercial, so I work with people that literally buy places and buy storage units. I've learned so much in the last 2 years. And I'm really glad that all the thoughtful thinking came up of the impact to the people, because I have heard horror stories that here things would happen. And by the way, I wouldn't limit the time because, well, I walk around Dexter almost every day. And so I really appreciate the fact that you're thinking of the people, the impact on the community. And also, I found it interesting as a citizen sitting here listening to the legals that, well, for how many years? What can happen down the road? So thank you all for putting all that thought into it. I appreciate it.
Thanks for attending the meeting tonight.
And then a follow-up question also about, then I would add to, related to the storage units. If somebody's able to, will they provide electricity? Because if they do, then that furthers the ability for somebody to operate a business there potentially. If they, I don't know if you can restrict that. Because if they don't have electricity, that limits their ability maybe to operate a business.
That's
So something to consider.
Yep, thank you for that. Appreciate the thought. Josh, are there any hands up? It doesn't look like it to me. Anyone? Anyone online want to speak this evening?
I have no hand on.
Okay. All right, we're down to council comments. Let our student reps lead us off. Julian, if you're willing, do you have any comments this evening?
Yes, based on the discussion, just adding that we're moving past the issue. I agree with you, Mr. Teo, and that we should probably be doing things that are different topics at the moment. And I don't know, I guess there's a lot of division, and yeah, we can probably be working on things that won't keep us so stagnant. But yeah.
Thank you. Owen?
Yeah, I regretted not commenting during last meeting at this time, because I did want to thank all of you for shepherding Julie and I in at this contentious time, and I've been treated with nothing but respect from all of you, regardless of, but adjacent to the fire station discussion, and I didn't want to bring this up during the new business section because it wasn't really vocation versus vocation, and I didn't want to get bogged down in that. But I feel compelled to talk about it as a 17-year-old. I'm very familiar with circles that have a sharp tendency towards political apathy. With all due respect, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure if you surveyed Dexter citizens, between the age of 18 and 22, I doubt 10% could give me your name if asked. And what concerned me, at least for my first month on this body, is when we have non-arranged participation and people come up and call us childish, and that's sobering, and it's not invalid. And I struggle, right, because in many ways, you know, the discussion of the sign, you can have your own opinion about whether it's misleading or not. In some ways, it doesn't necessarily matter, if the public feels it was misleading. And in this age of national politics being the way it is, I think local politics has a heightened responsibility to serve the public. We're all neighbors. We're supposed to like get along and work together. And I think the fire station, which is supposed to be a watershed moment for the community, a big nice thing for all of us, I don't want that to turn into a ugly reminder for a portion of our population about how the council, you know, ignored them in their eyes. I guess what I'm trying to get at is I'm just wary of alienating the public, and there was resentment tonight. There is resentment. I'm worried about future resentment, and I don't want to create the perception of a rogue council that doesn't, you know, consider what people who spend their time coming to city council meetings have to say. And I just, in general, I don't think it has to be this thing where, oh, you messed up the vote where you approved the millage because you weren't sure on the location, and now I get what I want and the ball's going downhill. I don't think that's how democracy should work. I think when a ball is rolling down a hill, one of the key awesome features of democracy is that you have safeguards and switches to stop that ball rolling if people think it's rolling too fast or rolling the wrong way. And I can't extend that analogy farther. But I guess it boils down to, I want to make sure that we're hearing the voices of people with very strong opinions, and I don't think they're necessarily wrong. I'm certain that they want what's best for our community, and ultimately, I think the threat of having a council that's very far removed from Dexter as a community is greater than the threat of less than ideal fire response times.
Bye.
It's really good to be back and right back into it, really. I think one of the biggest things I was talking about the fire station has made me think about is kind of how much I feel like has changed for how long in such a short time I feel like I've been on this council. Like I've only been here for a year, but also at the same time, it's been a whole year, you know, and I'm sure that we'll probably still be talking about the fire station when I leave. So my only thought is that I would at least appreciate for all of us, I think we all would, that when we talk about it, it would be with less tension and more agreement, with more focus on the future and less about what's already happened.
Thank you. So,
Thank you.
Jane?
I just wanted to correct, I was a linguistics minor, and so I feel bad that when I was offering the correction to Michelle, I was calling them clauses and subclauses, but in fact they're phrases, noun phrases. So that was bothering me. I also, we're a couple months out, 2 months out from National If You See Something, Say Something Day. As people might remember, I put a brief note in the paper about that, and calls to just be observant of your surroundings, and you know what's normal in your neighborhood, in your area, and so I just wanted to, I mean, I'm likely going to put a similar note up this year, but there have been some things happening in and around my neighborhood here on farms. There have been some vehicle break-ins, or people leaving keys in their car. I don't know all the facts, but cars have been broken into or accessed, things taken out of them, vehicles have been taken for joyrides and then crashed. People are trespassing through backyards. I would just encourage everybody to be vigilant, know your neighbors, keep an eye out, let your neighbors know if you see something that's unusual. The Washington County Sheriff's Office has been extremely responsive. Do not hesitate to reach out to them if you see something that you think warrants that. Thank you.
Is that date in early October? I was forgetting when that is.
It's September 25th.
End of September. Okay, thank you. Zach?
Well, while the goal of calling for unity is noble and should be applauded, it's also very cheap to call for it without backing it up, without action. It takes a lot of effort for folks who disagree, have big philosophical questions to get along. My own experience, I've had to do code enforcement where I have to tell people they can or can't do things with their property. You built the deck, you have to tear it out, or we're gonna fine you $200 a day. That's not a really good relationship to have with someone, but every single time when I've had to go to court, I sat at the same bench next to the person. It really confused the judge. It requires understanding people, their motivation, knowing that they're an actual human with actual motivations. It involves not attacking them personally, but engaging with their positions. That's all.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you.
Sure. Wow.
Sure, just a couple of things. I appreciate the student input tonight. Thank you for being part of this process with us. Owen, I believe it was you that said, you know, we're all neighbors, community is small enough that we can really get a sense from engaging with the community and talking to the community on what people are thinking, what they want. And with that said, I'd like to just let everyone who's here know, and for, you know, the video, if anyone wants to watch it later and hear this, and I'm not a big email person, so I apologize to anybody who's emailed me that I have not emailed back. The way that I engage the public is that I attend as many community functions as possible. I have conversations with people. I hesitate to email because I think it's more valuable to have a one-on-one conversation where you can ask and answer questions in the immediate. And so that's why I provide my cell phone number to anyone who wants it. I work from home. I can always find 5 minutes in the day if someone wants to knock on my door. But I'm just not a big on getting a sense of what people want and need in an email conversation.
Thank you. Wow. Okay. We are down to proposed items for future meetings. Does anybody have anything for the next meeting or meeting beyond? If not, I will seek a motion for adjournment at 9:07. Moved by Griffin, second by Hubbard. Maybe that.
Oh, it's you and I here.
Yeah, you will say. All those in favor, signify by saying aye, please. Thank you, everyone who attended the meeting. Appreciate your time and attention.